All right, today we're going to dive into something really fascinating. We're looking at two completely different voices that are making a pretty similar and honestly a pretty radical claim about our reality. So on one side, you've got Bashar, a consciousness said to be channeled from another dimension. And on the other, there's Gregg Braden, a scientist who's all about bridging the gap between quantum physics and ancient wisdom. Let's see how these two very different paths end up at one mind-bending conclusion.
So what this really all boils down to is a single, massive question that sits at the very heart of what it means to be human. Is the world just kind of happening to us, or is it a direct reflection of us? This is the core puzzle they're both trying to solve. Let's see how they get to their answers.
And believe me, these two voices could not come from more different places. You know, Bashar's insights are presented as this direct download from a non-physical being. It's like a physics of existence from the ground up. Braden, on the other hand, he's more like a detective, piecing together clues from quantum physics, from ancient texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and from real-world human stories.
So here's our game plan for this. First, we'll see how both of them completely challenge our basic assumptions about the world. Then, we're going to explore their models of reality, uncover the hidden power source they say we all have, compare their practical how-to guides, and finally, see where these two paths ultimately converge.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Both Bashar and Braden start by pushing back on our most fundamental assumption, that the physical world is solid, fixed, and out there. They're both basically saying that what we see and touch is just the surface layer of something way more dynamic and responsive than we've ever been taught.
So if reality isn't what it seems, then what is it? To really get their perspectives, we first have to look at the models they propose for how existence is actually built. You know, how do they describe the very fabric of space and time itself? All right, so Bashar's idea, wow, it's a real mindbender. He says there isn't one solid, continuous reality. No, instead there's an infinite number of static, completely frozen frames of reality, kind of like the individual still frames on a roll of movie film. He says your consciousness acts like the light of a movie projector, flashing through these still frames billions of times a second. And it's that rapid flashing that creates the illusion of continuous movement, of change, and of time. Now, Braden comes at this from a totally different angle, something he calls vertical time. He suggests that in any single moment, it's not just one thing happening. Instead, there are many layers of possibility, all these potential presents coexisting at the same time. I want you to imagine you're driving on a highway with tons of lanes. You're in one lane, but all the other lanes exist right there alongside you, holding all these different potential outcomes.
And what's really compelling here is how Braden grounds this idea in some pretty heavy-hitting science. He actually points to Albert Einstein, who himself suggested that our neat, linear perception of time, past, present, future, isn't the full picture at all, that maybe the past and future aren't nearly as separate as we think they are.
Okay, so let's just pause for a second here. Whether you call them parallel realities or quantum possibilities, they're both describing a kind of multiverse, right? They're both saying that all the potential outcomes already exist and we're just navigating through them. It's really the same core idea, just explained with different metaphors, a film projector versus a multi-lane highway.
Well, this brings us to the most important question of all. If all these possibilities exist at the same time, what's the mechanism that decides which one we actually get to experience? What's the engine that drives us from one reality frame to the next, or from one lane of time to another?
From Bashar, the answer is simple. It's your consciousness. Think of it as your unique energetic signature, your vibe. It's the combined frequency of all your thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotions. And this signature, this vibe, acts like the light from the projector. It's the specific frequency of that light that determines which of the infinite still frames you light up and therefore experience as your reality.
Braden, though, he gets even more specific. He really pinpoints human emotion as the powerful language that speaks to what he calls the quantum hologram, which is basically the energetic field of all possibilities. He says that with our feelings, we aren't creating reality from nothing. We're actually claiming or awakening a version of reality that already exists as a blueprint.
And to back this up, Braden has this absolutely wild real-world example. He tells the story of a bus trip in Egypt that was supposed to take 8 hours. But the passengers got so wrapped up in the shared feeling of joy and anticipation, feeling as if they were already there at the Great Pyramid, that they somehow collectively compressed time. The bus arrived in just 4 hours. 4 hours! I mean, can you imagine? The driver and their military escort were completely baffled.
So, okay, this all sounds incredibly empowering, but how do we actually use this power? If we can choose our reality, what's the instruction manual?
Let's compare the practical how-to guides that each of them gives us. Bashar offers a very precise 3-step formula. He calls it the engine for navigating your reality. Okay, so step 1, you act on your highest excitement or your passion, whatever that is in the moment. Step 2, you do it to the absolute best of your ability, with your full commitment. And step 3, and listen, this is the one that gets a lot of people, you have to have absolutely zero attachment to a specific outcome. You just trust the process.
And this formula, it operates within a set of 5 rules of the game, which Bashar calls the unchanging physics of existence. So basically, you exist, you can't not exist, everything is happening right here, right now, we're all connected, what you put out is what you get back, and the only constant is change, except for these rules. Understanding these laws helps explain why the formula works.
Braden's method is, well, it's different. It's less of a formula and more about cultivating an internal state of being. He looks at ancient texts, especially the great Isaiah scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls, to uncover what he calls an internal technology.
So what Braden is saying is that the prophet Isaiah wasn't just predicting a future, he was giving us an instruction manual. He says the key isn't about taking a specific action. It's about embodying a specific feeling. By generating the feeling of peace internally, what he calls the vision of peace, you literally tune yourself to the frequency of the peaceful reality that already exists as a potential.
So you see the clear difference here, right? Bashar gives you this direct, step-by-step formula for taking action, almost like a user's manual for reality. Braden, on the other hand, is all about the internal state that you cultivate. It's less like reading sheet music and more like learning to play an instrument by feel.
Okay, let's pull back and look at the big picture here. We have 2 very different maps, drawn from completely different sources by people from completely different worlds. But what's so incredible is that they both seem to lead to the exact same destination.
And here it is. This is the core takeaway. Regardless of the words they use or the method they teach, both Bashar and Gregg Braden deliver the exact same message, one of profound, radical self-empowerment. They both conclude that we are not victims of circumstance. We are the central, creative force in our own lives.
And this really gets right to the heart of it. Bashar puts it so simply. You are the only permission you ever really needed to be who you are. Braden's way of saying it is just as powerful. We don't create from nothing. We just choose which pre-existing blueprint we want to awaken. In both views, the power is already inside you.
And that's what I want to leave you with. When a channeled entity from a metaphysical tradition and a researcher grounding his work in quantum physics and ancient scripture, when they both arrive at the exact same conclusion about our innate power to shape reality, what might that tell us about the fundamental truth of that conclusion itself?